On October 7th, we woke up to the terrifying siren sound signaling that something unimaginable was unfolding. The world around us was a blur of confusion and fear as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Israel was under attack, and the gravity of the events was only emerging. So, what one should do in such a case when you don't really know what's going on in the state of Israel. So I pick up my phone, and one of my first action was to call the mental health officer in charge of the Southern Command. When she answered, her voice trembled. She was in a shelter with her children while Hamas terrorists fired outside. Her husband was outside fighting off the attackers. It was at that moment I realized how deeply this war affected everyone. This included those of us who were supposed to be the pillars of support. You know, as mental health officers, we receive training to provide care and support to our soldiers and warriors. We don't fight the Hamas themselves. We help others navigate traumas. We are not those who experience them firsthand. This war, however, was very, very different. It shattered the illusion of safety and penetrated the very core of our lives, leaving none untouched. The second call I made that day was to the Gaza Brigade mental health officer, her second in command. When I reached her, she was located at the brink of the Gaza Brigade in Re'im. And at that day, Hamas terrorists had overtaken Re'im. The disbelief and shock I felt was overwhelming. The Gaza Brigade is a place where I visited often during my long years of service. It is a place I knew as a relatively peaceful, and it was now a battleground. Later, as we began to establish the mental health services in this part, and we built over there in Re'im a place in which we treated combat stress reactions, I came to visit about 2 days later on. I think that my visit there was a very, very surreal experience. You know, I wandered around the Re'im base and I saw the shotguns and I saw the bullet holes and I saw the destruction, and I said, it looks like a movie. It doesn't look real. And again, you know, I was not in the middle of the battle, but I came after that. But you know the place, and it still looks eerie and remarkable. And the third person I called that day was Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve, Yoram Ben Yehuda. As you already know, most of our army is built upon reservists. And he was the one who was supposed to be the commander of a center that is called the Combat Stress Recovery and Rehabilitation Unit. It's a backward unit. And I call Yoram on the first day, and usually this is a unit that we enlist quite later on during the fighting. And when he answered, he responded with an unwavering readiness saying, "Yes, Commander, we are here for your command." However, his next words revealed the personal toll this war was taking. He shared with me, "My son is in Gaza right now. He's in Sufa, one of the posts. He's stationed there and he's shot in his stomach. He's bleeding right now and nobody can get back to him. No one is able to reach him." The tone of his voice, filled with both duty and despair, cut through me. After our conversation, I hung up the phone and continued our urgent task of setting up the war rooms, evaluating the resources, and issuing enlistment commands. Tragically, Yoram's sons did not survive. Eventually, we retrieved his body, and a few weeks later, the identification process confirmed his identity at Shura. After that, we attended his funeral. And despite the immense personal loss, Yoram, after sitting Shiva for his son, returned to command the Center for Combat Stress Recovery and Rehabilitation with remarkable courage and dedication. Do I take the mother of three, which was in the shelter while her husband was fighting and she was in lethal danger. And now I allow her to continue to command the mental health forces of the Southern Command? Do I take Yoram, which has endured such a tragic loss, and we know that he's more susceptible to contacting PTSD, and allow him to command the rehabilitation center? My answer was an unwavering yes. Even though they endured these things, when they have a cause, when they have a purpose, when they know that what they are doing is good for them, this is one of the main things that enables you to keep on going. As we gathered the information, the full extent of the situation became clear. Our soldiers and commanders suffered heavy casualties during that day. Some units struggled to maintain cohesion, and despite these challenges, we as an army needed to press on and face the enemy. On that day, we realized that mental health was a big issue. And then there were two prevailing fantasies that began to develop in the army. The first was the belief that everyone exposed to trauma of that day would develop PTSD and cannot recover. We had phone calls telling us that the atrocities are immense, that everybody who witnessed them will be scratched, will be ill, and will not be able to recover. We had to reassure the commanders and soldiers that while the trauma was severe, not everyone would succumb to it. So we needed mental health professionals to go to the soldiers, and the only thing that they did is to tell them, this is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. The second fantasy was a bit more difficult. It was the expectation that I will bring mental health officers and they will wave a wand, and that wand would make all the memories of the atrocities and of the visions disappear. We enlisted around 800 mental health professionals, most of them in reserve unit from the reserve forces, and deployed them across Israel. At that day, we heard soldiers for elite units like Golani and Givati requesting their mental health officers. Commanders from Golani and Givati and Nahal called me and told me, I want the Kabanim here with me, with the commanders. And I think this is a major shift in the way that we were accepted and the way that we had an ability to deal. And the resilience and determination of our commanders and soldiers were truly inspiring. They picked themselves up. They knew how to use us to the best of their abilities.